making safety personal in the oil and gas extraction business. I'd like to begin by making a declarative statement. Ladies and gentlemen, hope is not a method. I say again, hope is not a method. And what I mean by that is hoping to achieve safety excellence, hoping to eliminate workplace fatalities within our company and within our industry is not a method for achieving that noble cause. We've got to have multiple strategies. And one such strategy that I think is critical to our success for eliminating workplace deaths within our workplace family is making safety personal. I'd like to describe and personally illustrate 4 ways in which we can make safety personal. I'm going to begin with sharing a business case for safety, talking about the cost of injuries, the financial impact, because I want to try to tailor the message to our audience. I think that's the first way we can make safety personal. We have to tailor our safety message to our audience. This room is full of line managers, field supervisors. You are responsible for the purse strings at the rig site, your M&S, the operating performance of that rig, as well as at the back in the office at the district or country level. I want to talk about the cost of injuries and the relationship to downtime, because I know that you will jump through hoops to prevent 3 hours of downtime. I then want to transition to focusing on a critical issue, perhaps the most critical issue facing our industry today, and it's around the top cause of oil and gas fatalities for those who work in the oil and gas extraction business. And then number 3 and 4, the way we make safety personal is by engaging the hearts and the minds of our employees before we engage their hands. This presentation has been broken into 3 parts from the original presentation. This 3rd part will focus on the 4th and final item in the original presentation outline, that we must engage the hearts of our employees through storytelling in an impactful manner. I want to transition now to my 4th example for making safety personal, and I want to share 2 personal stories. The first one I title My First One. Gentlemen, you don't forget your first one of anything. In this case, what I'm referring to is the first fatality on my watch as H&P safety manager. It occurred in July of 1995. It involved a mismatched hammer union, and as a result, an unsuspecting roughneck was struck by the high-pressure drilling fluid as a result of a 1502 2-inch wing nut that had been screwed onto a 602 or 1002 2-inch thread coming off of our standpipe. It is a deadly combination, and that combination still exists today. As recently as last week, we had a great catch where an employee found a 602 thread that had been left behind by a third party. Another one where a third party pressure tester was making up his 602 or 1002 thread to our 1502 wing nut in preparation for doing a pressure test on an H&P rig. The story goes, it was a cool summer morning. The mudlogger came up to the rig floor and said to the driller on a conventional rig, "Hey, my pressure sensor on your standpipe is not working. Could we please find something to replace it just as a temporary fix?" The driller went into the top doghouse. He lifted up the bench seat where he had a bunch of junk iron left over by other third parties. He found one that looked just like the one that was on the standpipe. He handed it to the mudlogger and said, "Here, what do you think?" He looked it over, and cosmetically the colors appeared the same. He did not look at the raised lettering on that union. Mudlogger said, "That looks good, that'll work." The driller set it out on the rig floor at the base of the standpipe where it came through the rig floor. On the next connection with the mud pumps turned off, the driller pulled one of his crew over. He said, "Slick, come here a minute. Hey, instead of you pulling the slips and working the tongs to make and break that next connection, I'd like you to knock that pressure sensor off there. Mudlogger says it's broken, it's not working. He's going to clean it up and fix it. While we got the pumps turned off, please put that other one that's on the floor in its place as a temporary fix." Slick did just as he was asked. He knocked the one off. There was some residual mud that poured onto the rig floor. He took that replacement union, he made it up tight, told the driller it was ready to go. The crew finished making that routine connection out around the rotary table. 500 PSI with the pumps were online, no problem. 1,000, no leaks. 1,500, looking good. 2,000, boom! That wing nut that he had just made up to the standpipe blew off. It was positioned in a horizontal position about 2 or 3 feet up off the rig floor. And that wing nut and pressure sensor became an 8-pound cannonball that struck Slick. The pressure fluid behind it drove his body up against the driller's side drawworks corner A-leg where he hit his head, and the force of that fluid pressure pushed his body around behind the A-leg. Slick died about 20 minutes later in the ambulance en route to the hospital. This is the deadly combination. How do we eliminate it? Well, we try to standardize on 2-inch figure 1502 across the fleet. But that doesn't eliminate it completely, because any time a third party introduces a 602 or a 1002 into our operations and makes it up to one of our 1502 wing nuts, the time bomb has been set again. To control that, we use that go, no-go gauge that will go over a 2-inch figure 602 or 1002, but will not go over a 1502 thread. The outside diameter of those threads is 5/16 of an inch difference. And late at night, in the substructure, covered in oil-based mud on a hot summer night or a cold winter night, you can't tell what size that thread union half is. That go, no-go gauge becomes a safety critical tool. And that's what we use to determine what we've got, so that we do not create that mismatched hammer union combination again. Ironically, that incident occurred on this location. The rig is in the background, the cemetery is in the foreground. This is the only rig picture I have in my office. It's the full picture that goes from the crown to the ground. I just took a segment of it for purposes of this presentation. In my opinion, our crews work and live that closely every day. Between safety and operational excellence on the rig floor and 6 feet under on this side of the wall because of a mistake, an unsafe practice, a deviation from our playbook, our EJSAs, deviation from our 20-step lockout tagout procedure. Whatever the contributing causes, that's the result if we don't improve our safety leadership. I want to end my presentation today on a positive note, and I'd like to share a positive story. I'd like to share with you what I consider to be my greatest day in the oil field. It occurred on February 11th of 2011 at our Personnel Development Center in Houston. It was on day 1 of 3 days of HSE training. We had a new crew in the room. They had done team building the day before. Now they were in for the first 3 days of HSE training. After delivering my opening remarks, where I've got 10 key points that I'd like to cover with the guys, some of you have heard those 10 key points before at the PDC, I told them to go ahead and take a break. Everybody left the room except for one young man. And he was seated at the 3rd row on the left side, where we have tables on either side, set up classroom style. I walked down through the middle aisle to go check my coffee pots, make sure they were full. And the young man stopped me. He stood up, he extended his hand, he smiled, and he said, "Mr. Hubler, do you remember me?" I didn't, so I real quick shot a glance at his name tag. His name tag read, William Straybeck. And my response was to smile back at him and say, "I don't know William Straybeck, but I know a Chase Straybeck and his little sister Lakin." And he smiled a big smile back at me, and he said, "Mr. Hubler, my middle name is Chase, and Lakin is my sister." I met Chase when he was 8 years old. I met Chase at his daddy's funeral in July of 1995. It was in a rural chapel in Louisiana, right alongside the cane fields. The type of rural chapel that you would expect to see, the cemetery right next door with a little white picket fence that went around it. After the memorial service, someone had pointed me out to Chase as the H&P safety guy. Chase came over to me and he pulled on my pant leg. And I got down on one knee so as to get eye level with Chase. And with tears gently rolling down his cheeks, with his chin quivering, clearly upset, and some shaking of his hands and his arms, he asked me this question. Sir, why did my daddy die? How do you answer that question to an 8-year-old boy whose father has been killed on our rig? How do you answer that question to a little boy who just lost his hunting buddy, his fishing buddy, the one who's going to teach him how to throw a ball or some other athletic endeavor? How do you answer that question to a little boy who just lost his hero? Ladies and gentlemen, there is no adequate answer to that question. There never will be. I consider February 11th, 2011 to be my greatest day in the oil field because Chase's presence in that classroom, in that seat, as a member of that new crew, reflected to me forgiveness. Forgiveness of me, Warren Hubler, forgiveness of our great company. Because it seemed to me that Chase could have had a chip on his shoulder for the rest of his life for killing his daddy in July of 1995. At the end of day 2 at the PDC, I asked Chase if he would please share with his crew members what he remembered about his daddy's death. He didn't remember a whole lot. In fact, as we went through the incident and talked about the mismatched hammer unions, he learned even more now as an adult about how his daddy died and why. He reflected on 3 things. Number 1, his daddy had one more day of work. His daddy was coming home, and they were going fishing. That's his last favorable memory about his daddy. His second point, he said, teammates, we got to take what they're teaching us here and we got to put it to good use, because if we don't, one of us is going to get killed and we will not return home to our families. His third reflection, he said, guys, I want you to know I'm married and I have a 2-year-old son. And my single most frequent thought while I'm on duty every day, every hitch, is going home safely to my wife and to my son. Please protect me from harm. Your crews think exactly the same way, and they are counting on you to protect them from harm. The topic of this presentation was making safety personal, so I'd like to leave you with one last thought, one last bit of lagniappe, that little bit extra. I think every one of us ought to have our own personal safety creed. Mine goes like this. My name is Warren Hubler. I am a safety professional in the oil and gas extraction industry. I am responsible for life. I actively care, and I am determined to make a difference. I hope there is something that I have shared with you this afternoon that will make a difference in your personal and professional lives. Thank you very much.